Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Mossry and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. Today, we're talking with Kevin Mossman, VP of Salesforce Development at Dual North America, an insurance firm. So, welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, Kevin, we always like to start and warm our guests into the show real nice and easy. Just tell our listeners a little bit about your background, please, Kevin.
Yeah, so I've been in IT for a little over 30 years now. Started way back before the dot-com boom, actually, just at the beginning of the dot-com boom, as a technical writer, and just acquired new skills and did jobs. I've done pretty much everything except QA in the IT side, in the IT world, from development to release engineering, what they all call DevOps, to production operations, technical support, to development, to kind of all of it. Like I said, except for QA, done most of the things in IT over the years.
Nice.
And I've spent the last right around 15, maybe a little more years in the Salesforce ecosystem.
All right. So where did your Salesforce journey start?
So I was working for Equifax when the mortgage market cratered. I'd been there for about 5 years, and they had massive layoffs because the credit markets, that all just, everything went to hell in a handbasket there. So I got laid off from Equifax, and I had a friend who had a small advertising firm, and he had a Salesforce implementation he'd done. And he said, "Hey, is this something you can take on?" And I did a little, I can figure it out. So I did that implementation, and I got that done. And he and I had a mutual friend that was the head of another small company, 25, 30 people, that was about to do a Salesforce implementation. And he said, "Well, Kevin just did mine. Maybe he can do yours." So I went and did that one. And by that time I was like, well, it's pretty fun, pretty interesting. So I got a couple certifications. And at that time, that was actually pretty rare. And so that kind of took off from there. Started doing larger and larger projects, starting as an independent consultant, and then eventually got on with a smaller consultancy, small to mid-sized, and then was hired by Capgemini in their financial services group. As one of the first Salesforce employees in their Salesforce practice. And I was an architect on large enterprise Salesforce implementations for them.
Nice.
Did that for a few years. By that point, I'd been doing projects just back to back for almost 7 years at that point. Just one project to another project to another project. And I was kind of burnt out. I was traveling a lot because back then we traveled for everything. And I had a year where I had spent like 320 days, 20 nights in a hotel in a single year. And I was just like, it's amazing what you can get used to, but this is not sustainable. So I actually moved into their practice leadership a little bit. And as part of that, I also spent time on their management consulting side. I'd kind of get loaned out to manage the management consulting side for projects that included CRM strategy and roadmaps and those kinds of things. So I did that for a couple of years on the management consulting side, and then went to work for Salesforce. Got hired at Salesforce as a customer success director in their banking practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 5 years.
Nice.
And then decided to make a move from that to the client side. back to working for the client directly. And so I spent a brief time at Transamerica. And then I landed this role at Dual. And I've been here for real close to a year now.
Perfect. So good recap, and having a blast, I believe, was what you just mentioned before I cut you off just there. But so it's funny you mentioned 15 years ago, being a couple of years in, getting a couple of certifications was quite rare because, it was so new. I was curious, actually, one of the questions I'd just written down then was, how was that journey learning Salesforce for the first time without Trailhead and, the resources that it is now? Like, where did you even go about learning? Was it just poke around and hope you don't break anything kind of thing and figure it out?
Hey, this was back in the classic days, so it was not as complex as what it is now. It was a little more simple. And all the documentation was still online, right? Trailhead, I think Trailhead kind of almost existed then. They had some online training type stuff, if I remember correctly. But all the documentation was there. So, you go out and search the documentation and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I did.
2014 Trailhead came out at Dreamforce 2014, the gamified version apparently. So, but still, early days, maybe definitely not as baked out as it is now with all the different certification paths and so on. The roles were not as identified as they are today. So your career is pretty much focused on a lot of financial services, banking, insurance, that kind of vertical. Was that by choice or just that's what happened?
It really wasn't. I've spent the bulk of my career in financial services of one stripe, and it was never planned. Once I had Equifax on my resume, they're a well-known financial firm, and so that I got more interviews with financial services.
Yeah.
But I've done life sciences companies before. The two first small implementations, they were both non-financial services companies. But yeah, it just, and I haven't really focused on it, but once you get into it, then your resume has more and more of those things, which then draw more and more attention from those companies. So it kind of builds on itself.
Makes sense. What's your opinion now, having spent 15 years in the Salesforce ecosystem, around specializing by industry? Do you think there's value in that, or because it's an old debate? Do you specialize in industry? Do you go by product or role? And I think some of our listeners who might be listening today might be thinking about how much they should focus on going down an industry versus a product. And it changes depending on who you ask and the market and so on. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, to me, the industry question is more is there something about that industry you already have a connection to? I mean, if you came out, if you have worked in banks before and now you're trying to get into technology, that's going to be an asset on your resume that you've been in the banking world. You understand their business processes, right? So again, you're going to get interest from those. I think especially given the job market right now, you can't be as choosy as that, right? A lot of it is you take what's out there right now. You don't need. It's not like you can sit around and say, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna turn down this life science opportunity because I'll have a bank calling me in the next week." That's not, right?
Right.
So I would focus on where how do I want to develop my career, right? One of the things that I didn't have back then when I started was that they didn't have the career paths, right? You had admin, advanced admin certs, developer, advanced developer, and pretty much CTE. Oh no, you had the sales and service cloud, sales cloud consultant, service cloud consultant, and then you had the CTE, CTA exam. That was pretty much it from the exam. Now they have a lot better defined career progressions with different certifications to match them. And you have a lot more kind of ability to really focus on where do you want to go next in your career. I've always, because my background before I got into IT was not, I didn't go to college for IT back then. I went to college for education. And so I built my career by learning the next new thing. So I got my first job as a technical writer, and I was on a project and they said, hey, we want to implement this version control and task tracking system. We need somebody to go learn it and become the expert. I'll do it. And so I did that. And then, hey, there's this new programming language we want to start using. We need somebody to go learn it and become the expert in it. Right. And that's how I built my technology career. It was because again, I didn't have a degree in technology at the time.
Yeah.
It was learn the next, always be looking at what's the next thing out there to go learn and develop expertise in.
So for those who are listening versus watching, putting your hand up and taking on responsibilities was Kevin's advice. And then I think a nice segue into what Miles is going to cover a little bit in a moment. Customer success, it means something completely different to whoever you ask, right? Different companies call it one thing. For some companies, it's sales. For others, it's about renewals. For others, it's just making sure your client sticks. Your role at Salesforce, and again, it's meant different things at Salesforce over the years as well, but you did 5.5 years at Salesforce as Director of Customer Success, focusing on supporting financial services. Give us your kind of 60 seconds on what that role entailed.
So when I was hired, and I'll say this was the entire 5 years I was there, this was an internal debate within Salesforce. As to what is the role of customer success, and you had people that were very much in they're advisory, right? And that's what I was hired to do. It was your job is to become the trusted advisor to the client executive, not to focus so much on the how to do Salesforce, but how to think about Salesforce. How do we structure around success? How do we value map? How do we make sure we're focused on the right things that are going to move us where we want to go, right? How do you have that line of sight from these are our corporate objectives to these are the initiatives we have to this is how Salesforce can help achieve those initiatives and fulfill the KPIs that you're driving to meet those objectives, right? That's what I was hired into. On the other end, you had people that were like, they should be commissioned. They should be being compensated on new revenue, right? They should, or they should be, if they're going to be advisory, then they need to be in the professional services side, and be about billable hours. And there was this constant conversation inside the company leadership that you could tell because we'd get from time to time, they would change. We need you guys to start tracking this. We need you guys to start tracking this. And you could tell there was this conversation around what is the value add of the CSM, right? Are they actually contributing to revenue? So there was a time when any opportunity we sourced, we had to put our name on it so it could be tracked that we had sourced this opportunity. Right. And then it was, and you could just tell every day they'd come down with these, hey, we want you guys to start tracking this. And like, oh, they're having that conversation again. Right. And ultimately, I was in the big round, the 10,000 person round of layoffs 2 years ago.
Okay.
And a huge chunk of that was CSG. And they made a very decided shift in that role, kind of away from that advisory level, at least for most of their customers. I think it still existed in some aspects in strat, like strategic accounts, but for pretty much everything else. The goal was anything the CSM can do, we're going to self-serve it. And through accelerators or whatever they call them today.
Yep.
And they're not going to have that CSM that can really get in, understand what they're doing, help them drive adoption, help them drive roadmaps. I don't think that's there anymore outside of Strat. I mean, when I was there, I remember I sat with a super regional bank, was one of my customers, and we mapped out a 3-year roadmap for them to shift to FSC. And I spent weeks sitting with them in the weeds, how to set this roadmap up, prioritize it, the metrics, all of it. And last I knew, they're still executing on that roadmap.
Yeah, every time, somehow I doubt that. Every time we talk to Salesforce, people who've worked at Salesforce on this podcast, and they're not really the target, but they're not our typical guest, right? Because we're generally talking to business owners, meaning owning the business side of things, or the technical owner of the Salesforce implementation, the CRM implementation. But often, on occasion, we've had a few, right, Kiro, who worked at Salesforce.
Yep.
And they always said the same thing, like it seems like it's constantly changing and nobody knows what they're doing. I'll talk to, on occasion, I'll just give a friend a call who works there, and I don't know what their strategy is with this role.
Their strategy is very simple. Think it through. What other company do you know that spends the money that Salesforce spends on marketing and branding? Right? Is there any other software company that produces these?
I have no idea.
No.
Probably not. No.
He was holding up, what's this guy's name? Astro?
Astro. It's my Astro question.
Yeah, keep in mind, I think
Astro,
the vast majority of our audience is audio.
This is a podcast.
Okay.
They spend. Think of how much it costs to put on Dreamforce, right? So say Salesforce is a revenue engine, period, right? And that is what they exist for, and it's just a reality, right? They are extremely revenue focused.
No, that I get. I mean, Benioff is a salesperson. He was
a salesperson. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He was the top Salesforce person at Oracle at like 23.
Yeah.
And was working directly with Larry Ellison before he started Salesforce. I mean, he knows how to sell.
But that, I mean, literally that drives everything. It's if they think it will, with very few exceptions, if they think it gets them something that they can put on the marketplace and drive revenue, they're in. And that was the big debate on CSMs. Were we at cost, or did we actually influence revenue? Right. And ultimately, somewhere up the line, they decided we were a cost, not revenue. And
not even in terms of stickiness. Anyway, my point is that it seems to change so fast and so often that it's difficult. It's difficult to know what their strategy is day to day, and if they're going to see it through. Anyhow, so let's talk about that a bit more, but more so in terms of comparing Salesforce to your time at Capgemini, and even your time as a independent consultant, and then now at Dual or Transamerica, where it's client side, right? Really, really, really different roles. I'm sure that if you started your Salesforce work, let's say 4 years earlier, you'd have had your own SI, right? Could the market change that fast? I think that you got locked. I wouldn't say you missed a boat, but you could have hit it, but it wasn't an obvious start an SI.
Right.
A few years before that, it would have been. So I'm sure you had no problems getting a job in Salesforce market at that time. But yeah, so what does it look like, right? Taking what you just said about CSM at Salesforce, comparing that to even the management consulting side at Capgemini versus the implementation side versus being an individual contributor where you really are the trusted advisor.
Yeah. So to me, I see two sides of the coin in the consulting world, both from the advisory versus and the implementation. Because there's a piece of the consulting side, especially implementation consulting, that I really loved, and that was I was driven to solve the problem. Right. I loved solving the problem. So when I went to Cap, the first project I was on, the project they hired me for, was the first time anybody had done P&C insurance quote to card on Salesforce ever. We had a Salesforce PA on the project, and my first day, he said to me, "We're not sure it can be done on Salesforce. What you guys talk, we were not sure you can actually do it." This was before any CPQ products existed. And yeah, we built, like, to stand up a test environment took 80,000 rows of reference data, right? Just to have the coverages and all the different rules for all the 50 states. Nobody had ever done something like that in Salesforce before.
That's why they called it a quote to cart instead of quote to cash. That changed. I never heard the term.
In insurance, it was quote to card. That's what they called it at the time.
Oh, to card.
Because if you quote to cash, you get into the billing side typically,
Right.
and we didn't go that far with that project. But that's what I loved. I loved that. And so when I went on, when we finished that project, then I went on to other projects. That was one of the things I would look for. I want somebody to say, "We've never done it before," or "We're not sure we can actually make this happen." Those are the projects I wanted to go be the architect on, because I loved that challenge of getting there and getting it done, right, and figuring it out. So I led the first integration of Salesforce and Guidewire. I led the first integration of Salesforce to a core banking platform, because I loved doing that kind of I love that kind of challenge.
So
when you get into the advisory side, you kind of lose that a little bit, right? And this was kind of I liked the advisory side in some ways, because you don't necessarily have that same grind that you have on the project side. So there's that, but you're also disconnected from the getting it done, right? You do a lot of helping companies plan, but you're never around to see that actually come to pass, right? And that kind of carried through into my work as a CSG, where it was, again, a lot of strategic advice and helping them plan a roadmap, but you were never around to see it actually work, right? And that was kind of always one of those things. I was like, man, especially like with Salesforce, every February they shuffle all their accounts. Mm-hmm. And so you might not have the same accounts year to year. And so it was this constant, and that was kind of the bummer for me in that. I mean, I loved being in that role. I loved working with the customers, but it did kind of bug me to not ever get to see the finished thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the nature of consulting,
Yeah, it is. Well, the project side, you're there and you see that project generally to the end, right? You're there for the launch. You get to you get to see the metric shift, right? As this thing does what you planned.
No, not really, right? If you're doing an implementation, you finish the implementation, you're off to the next project, particularly in the consulting world.
We typically, in my experience, we stuck around at least through some period after.
2 months, 3 months,
3 months, enough to know that you'd been successful or not, right?
I may argue that that's not enough time to know that you're successful.
And maybe that's not everybody's experience. That was my experience. You at least have some connection to it.
Right. So, like, if you compare to what you're doing now, right, at Dual or Transamerica, right, you're talking, how long you've been at Dual now? A couple of years, right?
A year, just a little over a year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
applications in flight, you're making changes. Like your thinking is very different. You're not thinking in terms of a contract,
Nope.
right? You're thinking in terms of, right, a real impact to the business, the long term. You're monitoring the KPIs, I assume,
Yep. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
so based on what you're saying, that's really where you would look.
This is yeah. And the other thing about the consulting side and the Salesforce side that always kind of bugged me. There is a level of consulting and certain clients that will just swallow whatever they're told. That's generally not a good idea. You have that, but by and large, you can go in and give the customer the best advice that you have. There will always be a question in the back of their mind. What are you trying to sell me? Are you just trying to get more billable hours? And at Salesforce, it was, are you just trying to walk me down the road to a new product or more of the product, right? There's always that question in their minds about the sincerity of the advice you're giving them, right? Because let's be honest, there are bad consulting firms out there that do some things to increase their billable hours. That I saw account executives at Salesforce way oversell clients, selling things that they really didn't need or wouldn't be able to use for years, right? To get the deal, right? To make their numbers. And so that's
whose fault is that? Is that the AE's fault, or is that the customer for not understanding what they're signing? Like, they're still getting a contract to review and sign, right?
It's an incentive thing.
You'd be surprised at some companies. You'd be surprised at some. I got called in on 2 accounts that I'm going to go off the top of my head, where they were sold multi-million-dollar, multi-year contracts. And when it got to when the people, the implementation level leaders saw it, they're like, what is this? This is not in our roadmap. This is not in our architectural plans. Some executive way up the chain got sold that this was the grand poobah thing. And they're sitting there going, right? I walked into one client that the customer AE had, again, they had a long-term contract in place. He rolled them into another long-term contract. And the only way to do that and make the financials work was basically to put everything in the kitchen sink in that contract, in their Zila. And they literally, and then, he closed the deal. He knew he was not getting any more revenue out of that company. They were his only client. Wow. And so then he went off to another customer. He took his winnings and left. And I'm the CSM on the account. And the customer looks at me and says, we're not spending another dime with Salesforce until we consume every bit of this contract. And I'm sitting there looking at it going and understanding where they were just in their technology, infrastructure and ability. They're not going to be in a place to consume some of this stuff for years. They're talking about this in the early days of some of the Einstein stuff. I'm going, they're not going to have their data in shape for 2 years for any of that to be meaningful to them.
Yeah. So
data is a disaster, and you're like, so those things happen,
yeah.
right?
So, so you work at Salesforce, right? How would you recommend if you're someone in this position?
Yep.
Maybe you're the executive who got oversold. Maybe you're now on the implementation team. What advice would you give to them? How do they handle this? I've overbought.
I've overbought. Yeah. Well, you did what that customer did. You just tell your Salesforce rep, we're not. You don't get another dime until we consume all of this contract.
And that's going to work. It's
going to motivate Salesforce to. Well, at the time, again, I don't know what CSG looks like now. At the time, we were able to take that to our leadership and say, here's what the customer has said. All hands on deck to move them along their roadmap as quickly as we can. and consume this stuff, right? Let's bring in architects. Let's bring everybody we can get our hands on that can help them move towards consumption, right? Because you're at that point you signed a contract, right?
Your advice is basically make the best of you can with what
You make the best of
and get
it
the most value out of it.
And my advice to anybody dealing with Salesforce is you sign a contract based on your current priority and roadmap, period. That's it. That's the only thing you use as a basis for a contract is and proven value.
Well, you won't have to prove value till you implement, unfortunately.
Well, but the other way to say that is don't believe everything you see at Dreamforce.
Yes. So let's take the other side of the coin.
Right.
You're now that same executive, and you're going to Capgemini, and I'm negotiating an implementation contract. Right? What are the gotchas there?
In my experience, is accountability for outcomes. Right.
Milestone billing?
No, outcomes, the metrics, the KPIs.
Oh, they'll never sign that. You've seen
I've seen it done, but it really quickly tightens things up. I'll tell you, right? And no, you can't get into granular KPIs, but you can. There are consulting firms that get into joint accountability contracts, but yeah, and the other thing is that I always advise people to make sure they're in their contracts is don't let the consulting firm build resumes on your dime, right? So I always told my customers when I was in CSG, you need language in that contract that says X percentage of the people on your program at these levels need to have X years of experience on Salesforce. X percentage of them need to have worked for this consulting firm for this amount of time. X percentage of them need to have X certifications. Now, outside of Salesforce, certifications are hit and miss. The one thing that I will say, I've always said about Salesforce certifications is there's very little fluff in Salesforce certifications. You pretty much have to know the stuff. You got to know what you're doing to get a Salesforce certification, by and large. Some rare exceptions. But there are other IT certifications that are just paper, right? If you can breathe and search Google, you can pass it, right? But I would say you build into your contract because what I have seen consulting firms do is sign a big contract and say, okay, we're going to put an experienced engagement manager on it. We're going to put half maybe of the PMO Scrum Masters or whatever are going to have some experience, but we're going to bring a bunch of junior people in. And same when you get down to the developers and the admins. Yeah, we may give you one or two that know what they're doing that we know are a solid known quantity, but we're going to hire a bunch of people that we don't know from Adam, and we're gonna use you to build their resumes. And that to me is one of the biggest places where those things go awry. Is that you can staff up a project with really green resources, and your chances of success go way, way down.
It's the classic cookie cutter approach, right? Get sold the A team, and then you get the graduates fresh out of studies, right?
And that's a valid thing, right? That's why I wouldn't say no. You're not going to bring in any freshers. I'm fine with you bringing some freshers in, but it's not going to be 90% of my team,
right?
Right. And I'm fine with you hiring some people from the street for this project. I understand you may not have a huge bench, but it's not going to be 90% of the team of people you've never worked with before.
Right.
I want to know we got a solid group of people here that know what they're doing, and they've been with you long enough that you know the quality of their work. Right? Now we have a shot at a successful project. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And no revenue resume-driven design.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's we're just now starting to bring in dual. In fact, 2 of them started today. SI resources. And that was one of the things when I sent them the specs, I was like, it's a small team right now. So it's like 1 onshore and a few offshore. I said that onshore person has to have these credentials and experience, and they can't be new to your organization.
So going back to what you said earlier, right? Now you're at Dual. I'm sure you have internal resources, and maybe they're just different. But what about that guy raising his hand? I want to learn this. I've never done it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. So this is why I'm not opposed to freshers. I remember when we did that first Capgemini project, we were building their Salesforce team, right? I was like the 3rd hire in that Salesforce organization, 3rd or 4th. So we went out to their bench for other technologies and said, hey, any of you guys want to come learn Salesforce? And we put them through boot camp. And I'll never forget, we had this one guy, fresher out of college. I can't remember the technology he had gone and learned. And he's sitting on the bench. And then we were like, hey, you want to learn Salesforce? He said, sure. So we brought him in and sent him through boot camp. 2 years running, we had to have very serious conversations with senior leadership to double promote him so we could pay him enough to keep somebody else from taking him. He was that good. He's one of these guys we could say, hey, the customer's interested in this new technology. And 48 hours later, he'd come back and be an expert on it. So absolutely bring them on. I love finding people that want to learn. I'm it's funny. I've got a leadership offsite for the next 3 days. And one of the things we each of the groups has to present is their strategy for next year. And part of that is our team strategy, right? How are we growing our team? Not numerically, but how are we strengthening our team? And in my mind, that consists of, yes, I want them to go get new certifications. I want them to get out on Trailhead. I'm a huge Trailhead believer. I'm an all-star ranger. I'm a massive Trailhead nerd, right? Absolutely, I want to do that. But I want them to also be communicating that to other people. So we're going to host a Trailhead challenge across the company, business and IT. Anybody wants to come learn Salesforce, we're going to put a contest together. We'll find some prizes, right? Maybe I'll talk to my Salesforce rep and get some Salesforce swag. In fact, the Salesforce swag store is now public. You can go order Salesforce swag yourself, right? But we're going to host a Trailhead challenge. We're going to do lunch and learns. I had a manager come to me about 2 months ago and say, hey, I've got some people on my team that have heard what we're planning to do with Salesforce and they're interested in Salesforce. Would you talk to them? And sure. And so I sat down with them for an hour and just kind of did the Salesforce 101. This is what it is. This is what it does. This is how we're going to be using it. And then I said, hey, here, get out on Trailhead, go learn. We'll pay for certifications if you want to get certified. If you get into a Trailhead and you've got issues, you can't figure out some challenge, ping somebody on my team. We'll help. Right? Because absolutely, I mean, what our plan for Salesforce is it's going to be used pretty much wall to wall across the organization. So I want as many people to get familiar with the platform as we can.
Is there a way you can go above and beyond before we move on? Above and beyond, for example, I know sometimes in the consulting space, just paying for the certs, I mean, that's nice, but it's kind of favoring the SI, right? It's in their interest to have more certified resources. Paying a resource $1,000 per, cert they get, for example, or increasing their salary or giving them an extra week PTO per cert or whatever, right? They're motivators that might make a difference. So I'm curious. Obviously, you've worked SI, you've worked at Salesforce, you've worked in house. What has been the best motivating factor to encourage ongoing learning and development around Salesforce certs that you've experienced during your time in the ecosystem?
So Salesforce Trailhead challenges are fun. And I've designed them before, and you have one track for this. You have to create trail maps for them, right? And they're different IT versus business, right? So that's kind of and you do prizes for each, right? Those are always fun and they're competitive. And if you got a good, I've seen those be very successful. Certifications, again, I make it part of my employees' annual goals that they advance their certifications. My team is going to be in their goals for next year. They're going to get at least one Salesforce certification. They're going to get 2 certifications next year, each of them. At least one of those has to be Salesforce, a Salesforce certification. The other one can be something else we use in the company. So we're a TOGAF shop on architecture. So my architect, I say, if you want to get a Salesforce architecture certification and your TOGAF certification, that's great, right? But they're going to get 2 certifications next year.
And that will presumably go against things like merit increases and things like that. Yeah, got it. So incentivize them as part of their performance.
I have also seen companies be very effective saying you get $500 spot bonus for your first certification. You get $1,000 spot bonus for your second certification. When they're really I've seen that companies that more. I mean, when you go into a company that's never used Salesforce before, and you're trying to get a bunch of IT people that don't know Salesforce to buy in and get on board, and from a leadership standpoint, this is the future. And there's that reluctance, right? Am I going to lose my job? Right. I've absolutely seen companies incentivize and say, hey, we want you to understand how this can be a part of your future, right? We're not, just because we're doing away with the technologies you've worked on for 5 years, doesn't mean there's not a future for you in this technology. And we'll give you a $500 bonus for your first Salesforce certification here. We get $1,000 for the second one, and any thereafter, right? And really kind of that's the kind of thing, when you have that resistance, it's a good thing to get your team kind of over the hump and bought in, right? Because I've seen very few people, once they get to understanding how Salesforce works with technology people and how quickly they can be effective in doing things, they, by and large, this is pretty cool, actually,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So quick couple of questions to close out the topic. The first one being, what was the biggest mindset shift you personally experienced going from consulting SI background to working in-house at Salesforce? That's a journey that we still see a lot of people make in terms of working at a partner to Salesforce in-house. What was your biggest mindset shift that you found yourself having to make?
I guess there are 2 things. Salesforce is a very unique company, just culturally. Unfortunately, they've from the people that I know that are still there, so they've lost some of that. But at the time, Salesforce is a very cool culture to work in. So but it was unusual, right? It was actually an unusual culture to work in. I remember, just a trivial thing, but I remember in the consulting world, I was getting 6 weeks of PTO a year, right? Or something like that, but you never got to use it, right? Because PTO was always subject to client demand, and client always demanded, right? You were lucky to sneak in a week between Thanksgiving and Christmas or something, right? And so I went to Salesforce, and I'll never forget, I'd accepted the position, and I hadn't started yet. And my wife one day goes, "Hey, by the way, I don't remember seeing anything about how much PTO you get." And I was like, I don't remember it either. Well, look, my offer letter is not in there. So I called up the recruiter. I said, hey, I just noticed there's nothing in my offer letter about PTO. And she's like, if you want to take vacation, take a vacation. Clear it with your manager, go.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's different. All right. And so then I started looking online at this concept of unlimited PTO. And you see kind of two extremes on it, right?
Yeah.
You see companies that say they have unlimited PTO, but they don't approve any of it, right? And you see companies that really understand the benefit of PTO to their employees, and that it's good for the company if the employees are taking that time. And so it was I kind of went into Salesforce wondering, okay, what's Salesforce actually like? I'll never forget, I'd been there just over a year, and my wife and I wanted to take a 25th anniversary trip to Europe. One 17-day trip. And so I emailed my boss, said, hey, we're planning this vacation in the summer. What do I need to do to apply? And he said, okay, cool. You're going overseas, so don't take your laptop. And it was like
proper break. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Playing devil's
and I was just
advocate.
like, so the cultural things going into Salesforce really cool. But I think the biggest thing with Salesforce specifically was the constant drumbeat on revenue. Always selling. Always, that's a mantra. Always selling. Always selling. And if you talk to software salespeople, I remember a few months ago, I had a friend who was in software sales at IBM, and he was looking for a new position. I said, hey, I know some guys in Salesforce. I'll be glad to put a word in for you. And he's like, I'd do that for about 6 months, because it's known in the industry that Salesforce is rough on salespeople. They push them hard. But that is the
job. Yeah.
Of the organization. Their shift on return to office, the 180 that Benioff did, from we'll never work in the office again, to everybody's got to be back in the office now. That was all revenue numbers.
Yeah. I mean, you're in the Dallas office, right? So obviously you'll know about the $25 a day car parking just to go to work. I'm not sure I would pay that to go to work, right? So pros and cons though, right? But moving on, one question to conclude this topic before we move on to a little bit more about Joule. If you were sat in a room with three representations, one from Salesforce, one from an SI, and one from a customer, what would be your kind of advice and tough love, open and honest, piece of advice that you would give, to each of those different representations, having experienced all three yourself? What would that look like in terms of advice?
It's the same advice to all three, because I've seen all three get off the rails on it. It's about value. Value. If it is not providing value to the customer to meet their objectives, you shouldn't be doing it. If you can't tie it to value, you should have a huge flashing red question mark on it. And that's for all three of them, right? So if I'm on the consulting side, everything we do for a customer, I should be able to tie to value that we're providing to that customer that's helping them meet their objectives as a company. Period. If I'm selling them software and I really long-term want to be successful, I better be tying what I'm selling them to what their objectives are from a value perspective. Because the minute you go off that trail, the trust in that relationship breaks down. Because somebody at some point is going to ask you, why did you sell me this?
Got it.
Or
Okay, perfect.
why did you advise me to start to do this project? It didn't. My boss is wondering why he paid for that, because it didn't benefit us in any way, right? and on the customer side, when you're dealing with the software vendor or the SI, focus it on value. It's all about value. Every program initiative should be tied to value and have metrics associated with it. How is this going to serve our core objectives?
Spot on. All right. So, dual North America, a year in. Obviously, you brought into that role as VP of Salesforce Development. We know from speaking to you before, Andrew, you're having a great time. For our listeners, can we give again, conscious of the time, 60-second version of what dual North America do? Who are they? What do they do? How do they sell their product, and how do they make money?
Yeah, so Dual North America is actually a division of a company called Howden, based in the Netherlands. They have a presence in Europe and the UK as well. And it's all commercial insurance, what's in the US or what's called an MGA. And basically what that means is we don't sell a policy. We don't actually back a policy financially, although we have a division we've recently started that does that. We have a division we're currently starting that will actually to be a brokerage, but those are new things spinning up. But by and large, the meat of what we do is we stand between the broker and what's called the carrier, the company that actually funds the policy, that backs it. And we have the expertise to underwrite the policy and do claims. So let me give you two examples. If you have a $500 million office building and that needs to be insured, there's a very special skill set to understand how to quantify that risk. What's the flood risk? What's the wind risk? What inspections need to be done? What to understand what the risk is for that building and how to rate it, right? What size should the policy be? What should the policies be? Because there's going to be multiple policies, and what the premium for that should be from an actuarial standpoint. Now, say you're the Perot Museum here in Dallas, and you have an opportunity to bring in a collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts for a 6-month special exhibit.
Yep.
That has to be insured. They're not just going to stick that on an airplane and send it to you, right? That's a very different skill set than underwriting a commercial building, to be able to understand what is the value of these things, what is the risk, right? What security measures does the museum have to have in place? And based on that, this is the risk, this is what the premium needs to be, right? All those things. So your carriers that back those policies, they don't, by and large, have all those people with those different skill sets. The brokers obviously don't. They're selling the policies, right? They're the feet on the street working with the customer. So that's where we come in. We have the expertise across a wide range of non-personal lines insurance to understand the risk and design and rate the policy. The other factor is for larger things like your $500 million office building, for example, you may not be able to find a single carrier, those companies that back it, that say, yeah, I'm willing to risk $500 million in that piece of land right there. That's a lot of risk in one spot. If that thing's in San Francisco and the big one hits, right? That's a lot of risk sitting in one piece of land. So what we do is once we design and rate the policy, we then go find a carrier, or if needed be, multiple carriers to back a percentage of that risk. So it's now carrier A, they're going to cover 10% of the risk, and there'll be 9 other carriers that each take a 10% slice of the risk. So no one company is taking that massive $500 million risk in one location, right? So that's what we do. So we do that. We do the underwriting. We have the carrier relationships, right? And so then we can put all that together and go back to the broker and say, okay, here's your policy. Here's what it includes. Here's how much it is. Here's the premium. You go sell that to your customer. They come back, they sell it. It's bound. Great. We got all the documentation. We send it out to everybody. Great. Policy's bound. If there's a claim, that then also comes through us, because again, we've got the expertise to go of people that know that specific commercial thing to say, yes, this is something that would be covered under the policy. Yes, the dollars make sense, right? This isn't fraudulent. They're not trying to scam us on how much money they're asking for, right? And then we turn around to the carriers and say, okay, you were the carrier or carriers on this. This is how much you owe to cover this policy. So that's where we stand. That's what an MGA in general. It's a very high level, but that's in general what an MGA is and does. Like I said, we over this last year, we started up our own carrier as well, kind of for certain kinds of policies called Homebound. And we are just now launching our own brokerage in the US. They already have a brokerage in Europe. We're launching our own here in the US as well. That'll be coming up.
Okay.
And online.
So where does Salesforce fall into all that then? So obviously it's quite a complex business, but I know from speaking to you before, Andrew, at around 200 users currently. Tell us a little bit about what you inherited from a Salesforce standpoint, what products, how many users, and I know you've got an ambitious but very doable goal of increasing that user count as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the nature of Dual is that we have grown a lot through acquisition, right? So we talk about all these different kinds of commercial insurance. The way we take on a kind of insurance by and large is we'll go buy a niche company that does fine arts insurance. Now that's a product we can offer. But what that means is over time, Dual is this stitched together, this cobbled together organization of all these different systems, right? We've got multiple policy systems, right? There's and processes that are very different across, right? Because everybody's doing things the way they've always done it. So about 6 months before me, they hired a new CEO who had formerly been at Nationwide to really start to put together an enterprise IT perspective and strategy and start to really think about enterprise operations and getting out of these silos and getting some of those efficiency gains and things. And so based on his previous experience, he knew he wanted Salesforce to be the unifying operational platform across everything, the primary desktop that everybody in the company uses to do their job, right? So that's where I came in. He hired me to take on that challenge and fulfill that mission. At the time I came in, they had a small Salesforce instance that had come through an acquisition, one of those acquisitions. Yep. It had a handful of users in it, using it for task and activity management around territory sales managers. So there's a group of people that go out and seek out new broker relationships. So there was a small group of people using it very narrowly around lead and task management, and that's really it. They didn't have anybody in IT at all that did Salesforce. There was somebody on the business side that kind of got shanghaied into doing stuff. And if there was something really complex they needed, they would borrow a consultant resource from the UK business. Okay. They've done a lot more with it in Europe. And that was just kind of the state of it. And so when I walked in, they were already underway, kind of going at it backwards from the way you normally would, but with a reason, right? So typically when you implement something like Salesforce, it's a workflow driven tool. It's about bringing on a piece of functionality, right?
Mm-hmm.
An operational team bringing their processes into Salesforce, and you bring the data that needs, right? One of the things that we needed across the company was a consolidated view of the book of business. So they had already started when I walked in the door of consolidating the data out of all the policy administration systems into Salesforce.
Okay.
So we had a singular view where we could see the whole book of business, right? No processes, just let's get the data in, let's normalize it into Salesforce. So that leadership could start to understand the broad picture. So that was they were already underway, and we basically decided right off the bat that the little work that had been done in the Salesforce environment for that one little group was not going to be something that we would retain long term anyway. Once we actually got into the operational work, so we basically just deleted all the data and started over. So we really, by and large, technically the org is 4 years old, but we started from scratch late last year.
So an opportunity to rewrite the rules a little bit by doing it that way. Yeah, love it. Good. Okay. So during that, so you've got the data, you've got the team's already done a bit of the legwork already. So that's one thing ticked. What else has been a challenge thus far in that year? What were the other observations and challenges you recognized early on?
So while we were doing the data, we were starting to then talk to, okay, where are we going to start operationally bringing teams on? And we decided to start at the beginning, which is our broker management, what we call producer management, right? Managing the life cycle of our broker relationships. So we started working through, okay, what does that need to look like? How do we bring that into Salesforce? How do we do the process re-engineering, right? And those kinds of things. So in the last year, we brought all that data in, and we've brought on the producer management organization. So they're live in Salesforce. We've also brought on some other kind of one-off groups that needed a workflow tool, and we didn't want to go buy a new one. We just said, we'll build something quick for you in Salesforce. Just, and so that's been to date. Right now, we're starting to bring underwriting in. That's our next big hurdle. By the end of this year, we'll have our first 2 product lines of underwriting into Salesforce.
Okay.
So
cool.
yeah.
So
And the big challenge, I think, is any transformational implementation anywhere, probably of any software, and that is the process re-engineering. Lift and shift is not an option. We're just not going there. You're not moving the organization forward if you lift and shift. You're just bringing the same problems along to a new platform, right? So it's been getting in the weeds with the business and talking through, okay, blank sheet of paper. What's the best way to do this operation? What's the most efficient workflow for this operation, right? How do we, what are the ugly things that you guys do because the current workflow is so disjointed and right? Let's get all the skeletons out of the closet.
Yeah.
Start with a blank sheet of paper, and we're going to design the future, right? Because, by the way, that's where you find the value, right?
Right. Going back to your earlier point. Yeah.
I can look at my operations leader and say, I can cut 70% of the workload off your team. Because they're using, I have a slide here somewhere I'm presenting this week. When we started, they had to bring a new broker relationship online. They had to touch 17 different systems.
Crazy.
And I'm like, right? And they're gonna do it all. By the time we're done, they won't leave Salesforce.
Okay,
and
just
the vast majority
quick
that'll be
time check.
automated. I'll never even see it. So
We're running low on time, so I want to ask you one more question, and then
sure.
we'll have Kira wrap up. My understanding is you're doing some exploration with Agentforce Data Cloud.
Mhm.
So it's obviously a topic of interest to our listeners. A lot of people are playing with it. How's that
Mhm.
going? What are your thoughts so far? Maybe what's the use case?
So I've done a lot of. I've been watching the AI thing. Went out and got some education on it. I think AI has a ton of potential. I think there's a lot of FOMO right now in executives, and so they're throwing a lot of money and hoping something sticks. I see a lot of the same patterns that we saw in the .com boom, frankly. Of, oh my, we have to have a web presence, right? Not thinking through how do we deliver value, right? It goes back to the value question. What value do we have? And I'll go out and look at people's comments about Salesforce's support since they laid off 4,000 support people and moved a bunch of it to AI. That was not a step forward for Salesforce.
It's a cost center.
It's a cost. But again, Salesforce has always been about its customer success, customer success, customer success. Your move to AI, if it pisses off your customers, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? If your customer experience goes in the crapper because you just had to move to AI, right? So to me, it's value, value, value. And Data Cloud, powerful tool. I think the agentic AI, there's some power there. But it's about show me the value. How is this improving my relationship with my customer? Not just lowering my costs, right? Because lowering costs is a temporary thing. If at the same time I run off a bunch of my customers, lowering my cost didn't help me any because now I've lost a bunch of revenue, right? Right? It's about value. Show me the value. How is this going to deliver value in my organization? How is it going to make my customer experience better for my customers? How is it going to help us meet those organizational goals? Not just be able to say we have we use an AI something, right? Again, I actually wrote a thing on LinkedIn about this thing, about comparing it to the .com, a lot of those same patterns. And here's the thing, there are going to be companies that get lucky in the AI space, and they're going to hit a winner, and they're going to make a ton of money out of it. But there's going to be a lot of companies that waste there'll be way more companies that waste a bunch of money, end up with nothing usable, right? Which is, again, that's what happened in the .com boom, until the bottom fell out of it finally, and all the fluff kind of got blown away, and companies got around to going, okay, what can we really do with this tool that delivers value? Oh, we can provide customer self-service, makes the customers happier, makes it easier on our team. That's a win, right? Now we've got a purpose to having our web presence. Oh, our customers can buy direct online, and we don't have to put a bunch of inventory out in retail stores. Oh, makes it easier for the customer. They get to control the experience, saves us money. Now we have a purpose for a web presence, right? And then you have the visionaries, right? You have the Amazons that came up in the web game and came up with an entirely new concept of value that nobody was thinking about, right? And those will happen too. But for companies that already exist, focus on the value. Don't get away from that. It's value driven. It's value driven. If it's not going to give you absolute direct value, question the hell out of it.
Spin it. Don't do it. Love it. Okay. So value is the thing.
The other thing under the AI piece that the .com boom didn't have to deal with. For large companies especially, it's great to talk about all the stuff AI can do. Let me ask you one question. Is your data in any kind of shape that AI can do anything with it? You can spend a bunch of money on AI, and if you're still got garbage data, your AI is going to spout garbage. Chat GPT's proven that over and over and over again. And
True.
you got to fix the underlying data. It's AI is not a band-aid for bad data. It's only going to propagate it.
On that note, Kevin, thank you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. And look, I know a lot of the topic, a lot of the message was value, but sometimes it's remembering that basic fundamental. I think in anything you do, whether you're working with an SI, you're working in-house as a customer, you're looking at exploring AI and agent force, relating that back to the value is probably not a bad first step. So thanks again, Kevin. You've been a great guest, and I appreciate you joining us. For our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Kevin. Thank you.
Oh, one more thing to throw in. Find a local roller derby team and support them.
There you go. More context to follow on that one.
That's right. More context to follow on that one.